Hi, my name is Cristina Robinson. I am the Education Coordinator at Orange County Coastkeeper. We are a local clean water nonprofit, and thank you for tuning into our OCCK streams where we'll be providing live webinars to educate our community. So today I'll be talking to you guys about microplastics. I'm going to go over what microplastics are, how they're defined, where they come from, where we can find them, and some ways that we can help prevent them. So our first picture here is a bunch of trash at one of our storm drain outlets in Seal Beach. Seal Beach is notorious for getting a lot of trash after the rains. And so as you can see here, there's a lot of plastic, a lot of styrofoam, a lot of little bits of trash, right, that we can see with our eyes. But so when we talk about microplastics, we're talking about stuff that we definitely need a microscope for. So by NOAA's definition, microplastics are going to be any piece of plastic that is 5 millimeters in length, less than 5 millimeters in length. And some really small microplastics can even be from 0.1 micrometers to 1.0 millimeters. Just to give you guys an idea. We also have a term called nanoplastics. So these are smaller than plastic pieces. These are ranging from 1 nanometer to 100 nanometers, so tiny. This picture on the screen is from when I used to work at an environmental consulting company. These are all tiny pieces of little bits of trash, plastic, microfibers, things that I saw under a microscope while sorting benthic sediment samples off of our coast. So different types of sand and mud off of Southern California, and trash and these microplastics everywhere. So where are these microplastics coming from? What are primary sources? What are secondary sources? Our primary sources are going to be microplastic pieces that are particles that are already created and engineered at that small, less than 5 millimeter size and length. So this is a really good example picture of nurdles. Nurdles are tiny plastic pellets. They kind of look like fish eggs. And this is how plastic is shipped across the world. It's carried this way in trucks. It's going to be taken to a plant and then melted down and molded into whatever plastic product it's going to be. So nurdles are one great example of primary microplastic sources. Some other things are going to be like glitter, fibers from synthetic clothing, and also microbeads in a lot of cosmetic products. Some secondary sources are just going to be particles from bigger things of plastic that break down. So anytime you see trash, just like the Seal Beach picture we started with, trash at the beach or trash in the streets, any type of litter, all of that plastic is eventually going to photodegrade. And so that is plastic breaking up into tiny little pieces because of UV rays and sunlight, temperature, heat, all of those factors, finally over time breaking up that plastic bottle or straw into tinier plastic fragments, eventually turning into microplastics. So that's what we mean when we say secondary microplastic sources. And during this time when that process is happening, this is when we're going to have issues with any type of plastic associated toxin being released and absorbed by other microplastics or nanoplastics. So we have a good example of microfibers and what they look like. So if we could get that picture back on the screen, that would be great. So this is an example of different types of like natural and organic clothing material versus a microfiber at the bottom. So other synthetic materials that are super common and comfortable to wear are going to be polyester, nylon, rayon, spandex, leggings. I love leggings. Leggings are my favorite, but unfortunately, since those materials are made with these tiny, tiny microfibers that have such a small diameter, every time we wash our clothes, those microfibers are actually breaking apart with every wash. Because they're so small, most of our sanitation and wastewater districts are unable to filter those out. So those microfibers are then released back into the ocean and are then in the environment. And once those small microplastics and microfibers are in the ocean, it's really hard to clean up. Another picture we have for you is our different types of face products and cosmetic products that have those microbeads. So on the left, we have some companies that were utilizing like the polyethylene plastic microbeads to exfoliate, versus on the right side, brands utilizing natural and organic materials to do the same exfoliation as well. The good news is that the US actually banned microbeads from being used in cosmetics. This was called the Microbead Free Water Act of 2015, and it went into effect, I believe, January 1st of 2018. So cosmetic products today should not be having them, but when you're buying them, please take a look of what's actually making that exfoliant in the product. And in Europe, the European Parliament also just approved a ban on all single-use plastics in October of 2018. So where are microplastics being found? I just told you the sources for primary and secondary sources, right? And in that, we talked about anytime we see litter and that litter turning into microplastics. So we're seeing microplastics everywhere. We're seeing them in your beaches, your oceans, in the coastline, on the shoreline, on the ocean surface, in the water column. Microplastics and plastic in general can sink. Some of it will float, some of it will sink. It just depends, since plastic is made of so many different types of chemicals. Depending on the chemical is what gives it its property of if it's going to sink or float. So we've actually seen plastic and microplastic pieces as deep down as 36,000 feet in some of our deep ocean trenches. And we're also seeing microplastics in ice core samples in the Arctic. They're doing research studies in Antarctica. And so pretty much everywhere. And then this goes for freshwater systems as well, right? If they're in the ocean, they're also in our rivers, our ponds, our streams, our lakes. A really good study just came out in 2019 about Lake Tahoe and microplastics being found on those shorelines. And we are also seeing them in air pollution samples above the Rocky Mountain. And we're also seeing them in our food and beverages. So I have a really good slide to show you about microplastics being found in bottled water. We know that they are in beer, tap water, bottled water as well, salt. Obviously seafood, if we have our microplastics in the ocean, and we have all of our marine life there as well. But I specifically wanted to show this picture here because it kind of gives light that just because you're buying bottled water, it doesn't mean that it's any safer than our tap water. I know that it's kind of scary sounding when there's microplastics in drinking water, but the numbers aren't better in bottled water. And if you're buying that bottled water, it's an increase in demand for that plastic. So it's kind of worsening the problem. Besides that, there's also tea. I found a study earlier in 2019 that made me so sad because I really love drinking tea, and unfortunately most of those tea bags are lined with plastic. So I have another good picture for you guys showing different types of tea bags and what they look like and if there's plastic in there. So most of the tea bags that you're buying in bulk are going to have that type of a thin layer of plastic lined in there. And the problem with that is that when you're drinking your tea, most of the time it's hot. When you have that hot water heating up the tea bag, it's then releasing all of the microplastics and nanoplastics. So tea specifically, that study I found showed like millions of nanoplastic particles being released with every mug of tea. So I highly recommend utilizing loose leaf tea instead, if you can. I've heard that there's also a brand of tea that does use only organic, 100% organic cotton for their tea bags, and that's it. There's no plastic lining or anything. But I would stick with loose leaf tea. Okay, so it's kind of found everywhere. Our human health interactions are going to be the next thing I talk about. So I did a poll to find out what you guys wanted to find out about microplastics, and a lot of people are concerned about human health, what's going on if we're drinking it, if we're breathing it. It's in food, it's in, it's everywhere. And unfortunately, we really need a lot more research done. According to the EPA, the current state of the science does not allow any assessment of possible human health risks from the ingestion of seafood contaminated, but further research is needed. So again, what studies have been found lately is that people are discreting them because they're ingesting them. They say that each person is eating about a credit card's size worth in weight of microplastics every week. And we're going to see a lot of research come from this. It's unfortunate. I wish we had faster paced research on this and that we could draw some sort of conclusions on how it will impact us, especially in my perspective. I'd really like to know plastic associated chemical toxicity and what that has with human health. But I think we'll see what's going to come out in the next 10, 15 years. There's been some research papers and articles that I've come across feeding mice and fish in the lab different quantities of microplastics. And based on that, they have seen behavioral and chemical consequences, especially of like certain contaminants being congregated in the liver and certain other physiological consequences as well. But we need more research. So we need funding, we need research to study this. I wanted to share with you guys too that yesterday there was actually California State Water Board meeting to discuss and define exactly what our definition of microplastics in tap water is. And we have this listed for you guys. It's their business number 9. They will be posting the video of their meeting up on their website so you guys can check back. They'll be going over what their definitions are, and then they're also taking in written comments from the public. So I highly encourage everybody watch that once the recording is uploaded and write them a letter stating your feelings and concerns due April 24th. The first thing you guys can do to help prevent microplastics is going to be to reduce plastic in general. Reducing plastic in general in any way possible is going to be the most helpful way, right? Because we know all that plastic eventually is going to be breaking down, turning into microplastics, and we can just cut that right at the source. Secondly, since microfibers are such a huge contribution to microplastic pollution, avoid fast fashion. So avoiding cheap clothes, cheap trendy materials that are used, all the really stretchy stuff. If you can buy more cotton or more jean, I highly suggest those materials, wool, anything that isn't gonna be the fake synthetic material. And I highly recommend and encourage shopping secondhand too. That is something that I really like to do. It saves me money, but I feel better knowing that I'm buying something, giving it a second life. And for the most things that I buy at a thrift store, they're also not going to be that fast fashion material. So I know that I'm also reducing my microplastic pollution. Another thing that you can do with your clothes to help as well is every time you wash your clothes, use a cooler water setting and a gentler cycle. So if you can like reduce the spin rate, that will be very helpful, and it'll be less abrasive on that material and those little microfibers shedding and then going eventually into the ocean. So cold water, reduce spin cycle, and then if you're able to, hang dry your clothes or air dry them, that would be helpful as well. It'll be great if you can utilize pH neutral laundry detergents, and to not wash your clothes with like anything bulky like shoes or anything that's also going to add to that abrasion. The next thing you can do is going to be avoiding any cosmetics that have those polypropylene beads. And like a lot of soaps used to have that, right? They used to have like Bath and Body Works. So just trying to look at the ingredients of anything that you're buying and making sure it doesn't have any type of micro beads. For the washing machine in general, they actually have some washing machine microfiber filters. They have portable options, they have a permanent option. I actually have a website called Plastic Me Not that has some of these. And there's also a tap water filter as well, because that was kind of my biggest concern when I started diving in, learning about microplastics. And so they have multiple tap water filters out there. They have just like a Brita filter, or you can have the option of where it's going to connect directly to your refrigerator, or the ones that connect directly to the sink. So different options there to help you, make you feel a little bit better that you're not drinking microplastics. Good news is in Orange County, we have our groundwater replenishing system at the Orange County Water District for Central and Northern Orange County, and with their system, it's actually filtering out microplastics. So yay for that. But yes, if you have any questions on microplastics, anything I covered, or you'd like to know more about, please email me, Cristina, Cristina, at coastkeeper.org. Okay, thank you for tuning in.